Before we begin this story, I'd like to remind everyone that this video is not made for kids. It is for older fans and adults. So fuck off and enjoy the fucking video! Also, I would like to inform everyone that the audio recording of this story is not for reuse anywhere else. This is due to a copyright agreement with some of the music artists involved. The original transcript, however, is available for adaptation by others, providing they use their own narrations. Thank you very much, Merry Christmas, and I hope you enjoy the story.
The tugboat, for its size, is the most powerful craft afloat. And the Star Tugs are the power behind the docks and waterways that make up the big city port. This is Tugs.
Trawler. Written and read by TARDIS9's.
Based on the television series Tugs by Robert D. Cardona and David Mitton. Christmas had come to Big City. It was a festive time of year, full of cheer and goodwill. All around the port, buildings and dockyards were decorated with colourful lights, tinsel and Christmas trees. Of course, both my Star Tugs and the Z-Stacks were unable to experience much of this for themselves. The waters were still too frozen for us to completely return our operations to there. However, with the Christmas rush, more supplies than ever before were needed, such as food for the nearby towns and villages, as well as coal and wood for fuel and heat generation. Fortunately, at this moment, we had seen the worst of the big freeze-up, and the ice was beginning to thaw. As such, the port was opened up for shipping, albeit mainly for essential goods such as food. All other vessels were either kept waiting or turned away. Yet despite all this, the port was still too dangerous to allow all tugs back into the harbour. Captain Zero and I arranged for our switchers to meet the railway at a small quay upriver and exchange their goods there, while only the harbour tugs would be allowed back into port after a fleet of small icebreakers had done their work each day. Of course, this did nothing to soothe the tensions between our two fleets. In fact, quite the opposite. I remember one morning when 10 Cents and Sunshine arrived to find that the quay was busier than ever. Barges lined the quayside, all full of crates bound for the port. Dock workers and cranes bustled around them. Puffer stood waiting with his goods train, and right in the middle of it all sat Zip and Zug.
Well,
grinned Zip as they approached.
what do we have here, Zug?
A couple of clapped-out star switchers.
Zug smirked.
Pity they were so slow we got here before they did. But then again, would we trust a couple of tugs who ram ocean liners or lose their tempers all too easily?
Yeah, well, that's rich coming from the Zero's response to Laurel and Hardy, 10 Cents retorted.
Hey, agreed Sunshine. Good thing there aren't any fire barges around, eh?
You take that back,
Zip argued.
only if you take yours back.
10 Cents protested.
Look, could you please just stop arguing and load me up?
Puffer cut in.
I've got a timetable to keep too, you know.
Oh, yeah, well, sorry, Puffer. 10 Cents replied, slightly embarrassed. He docked his barge and began unloading. Sunshine followed suit. Soon, Puffer's goods train was fully loaded, and he was preparing to go.
See you at the Christmas party in Uptown, then?
He asked.
Yeah, we'll be there.
Sunshine replied.
Can't miss it, can we?
10 Cents added.
As if we'd want to go to a party with a couple of Star Tugs,
Sniffed Zug.
Probably hog the whole thing for themselves with all the things they've done.
Agreed Zip.
Well, I don't know why they invited you lot to the party either,
Retorted 10 Cents.
Hey, You didn't think they've forgotten you mess up with the Angelus, do ya? Sunshine reminded.
Why, you big...
Zug began to yell, but a passing horn cut him off.
Oh, shut up, will ya?
Zebedee called out as he approached them.
You're doing me stacking.
He was on his way to the coal depot with a fresh supply and had stopped to pick up his delivery from a goods train at the quay. The siding for the coal depot was being repaired, and as the roads in the port had been subject to icy weather, the only other safe way for these deliveries was by water.
Oh, now look, Zebedee,
Zip began.
Those two are right, Zebedee interrupted. Thanks to you two and what you did to the Angelus, they more than deserve to come too.
Yeah, exactly,
agreed 10 Cents.
I don't know what you're acting so high and mighty about, Star,
Zebedee said, rounding on him.
It's not like all of us Z-Stacks want to take stupid risks. Some of us just want to do a bit of work like you know. And some of us actually work hard enough for a place that party to annul.
Both 10 Cents and Sunshine looked down at their bows at this. As much as they hated to admit it, the Z-Stacks had been putting a lot of efforts into their contracts this winter too.
Anyway, I haven't got time to be lecturing you all.
Zebedee huffed.
I've got work to do.
And so have I,
replied Puffer.
Bye 10 Cents, bye Sunshine.
Yep,
Bye Puffer. Bye Puffer.
the Star Switchers replied, as Puffer shunted away with his goods train. Then, their barges empty, the tugs left the quay one by one until only Zebedee remained. He loaded up his coal barge and made his way towards the port. He hadn't gone very far when he saw a marker buoy.
Danger,
He thought.
must be near a sandbank or something.
He turned to port to avoid it and was just continuing on his journey when he heard a cry. Help! Help!
Sounds like someone's in trouble.
He huffed.
Yeah, well, better check it out, I suppose.
And he carried on in the direction of the call. The voice in question soon turned out to be Warrior, stuck on a sandbank with a rather chilly-looking Lord Stinker behind him.
Well, if it isn't Captain Star's resident cloud.
Zebedee chuckled. Oh, quit laughing, will ya? Warrior replied. It ain't funny, you know.
Oh, you're telling me,
groaned Lord Stinker. He looked towards Zebedee.
He thought that marker boy was talking about a hazard on his starboard side. I told him it was port, but would he listen? And now look where he's got us.
Well, Big Mac and I are both working the coal loads,
replied Zebedee.
I'll tell him about it, and then fetch mighty more once I've finished me coal run. Only if I get a bit of salvage, though. Zero will have me boil if I come back empty-handed from this.
Yeah, sure, said Warrior. Just so long as you do come back. I'm pleased to say that Zebedee did as he had promised. Even if it cost me a bit in salvage money. You see, ever since that business with Johnny Cuba, Zebedee had proven himself in the eyes of my tugs to be the sort of character you could depend upon in an emergency. Indeed, his career as a Z-Stack was rather unfortunate, considering some of their more shady contracts. But then, he had always simply been the sort of tug who preferred to occupy himself with the task at hand. However, he was never above ignoring a cry for help from anyone, even if it was one of my Star Tugs. And so, he told Big Mac about Warrior as soon as they met each other at the depot.
Ah, so Warrior's stuck, is he?
He said.
Typical. Ugh. Anyway, thanks, Zebedee. I'll go and get Lord Stinker. You fetch mighty more, then take Warrior to Lucky's yard.
This said, the two harbour tugs set off, determined not to let another boat down. Indeed, Zebedee found Mighty Mo at the inlet.
Ahoy there, Mighty Mo!
He called. Mighty Mo yawned and stirred, his megaphone turning towards Zebedee. He had just been enjoying a short nap after having to spend all night helping the salvage team remove the last of the Krakatoa's remains following the fire at the old dock, and was none too pleased about having been disturbed.
Ahoy there yourself, Zebedee!
What do you mean coming in here and disturbing some crane's sleep, huh?
Ah, shut it, will ya?
Retorted Zebedee.
Look, I ain't here for pleasure. Warrior's gone and got himself stuck on a sandbank, and we need you to help me get him off there into Lucky's yard. Now hurry up, get tied on and get steam up, will ya? I ain't got all day, you know.
Reluctantly, Mighty Mo complied, and the two of them were soon on their way back to Warrior and Lord Stinker. Unbeknownst to anyone, who should be coming along behind them but Zoran, delivering an oil barge to the refineries outside of the port.
Hello, hello, hello?
He said,
What's happening here then, eh? I could have sworn Zebedee was on the coal runs.
Seeing that they were headed in the same way as him, he decided to follow on and try and see what they were up to. He was very surprised to see them pull up alongside Warrior, with Big Mac towing Lord Stinker in the opposite direction. Right, let's get this over and done with, grumbled Mighty Mo. Too right, agreed Warrior. I've been stuck here so long I'm beginning to feel like a clumsy tug.
Could have sworn that feeling was already familiar to you, Warrior.
Zebedee chuckled. The two tugs then watched as Mighty Mo's crane arm settled over Warrior. Strong chains were fastened all around him, and soon he was lifted into the air. Moving gently, Mighty Mo swung him to one side and lowered him into the water. Then, making sure Mighty Mo was anchored off, Zebedee was tied off from him and then tied onto Warrior. As soon as it was deemed safe to do so, Zebedee took Warrior in tow and began to haul him back towards Lucky's yard. Zoran passed by just as they had left the sandbank.
You're not helping that star mob, are you, Zebedee?
He exclaimed.
Because if you are, you better claim salvage. Already done, Zoran,
retorted Zebedee. Zoran just sniffed and carried on. Zebedee, meanwhile, took Warrior to Lucky's yard and returned for Mighty Mo. Luckily, the damage done to Warrior wasn't too great, so he was soon back at work. But it was swiftly becoming a very difficult day for Zebedee. Up and down the port he went as he made his way to and from the coal depot. Everywhere he went, he seemed to be constantly running into someone who needed help. There was Blue Nose, who, though he refused it, appeared to be having trouble trying to escort a naval tramper into port, largely because he had yet to learn how to successfully bring one in while it had a jammed rudder, despite the naval tug's protests to the contrary. There was Billy Shoebag, who, so he claimed, had gotten myself broken down like while delivering a load of dynamite that needed to be delivered to the demolition company before the new year. Then there was a tramper that had appeared to be carrying in some dangerous cargo and had to be inspected by the Coast Guard, who was struggling to get his motor started in the cold weather.
Ugh, anyone would think I was a star tug with all these calls for help,
he grumbled. Then he thought. Yes, it mainly seemed to be the Star Tugs who did all the hero work, from saving railway trains to defeating barrages of destructive logs to preventing environmental disasters. But what of the Zero Fleet? What good had they done? Damage a railway bridge? Sabotage a liner docking? Damage firefighting equipment? Then he thought about what he had done. From the day Johnny Cuba came to town, when he had helped stabilize a floating crane, rescue his rivals from being crushed by a liner, and single-handedly catch a dangerous criminal, to today's events.
No wonder they all look to me,
he thought.
Someone's gotta show we ain't all a bunch of idiots or crooks.
But then he thought about his own past. It had been he who had damaged that railway bridge and put those trains in danger, and it had been Top Hat and Lord Stinker who had put themselves in harm's way just to save them. Every time he thought about that day, he felt alarmed about one thought: that he was responsible for an incident that could have injured or even killed others. Something inside of him had changed that day. Yes, he regarded the Starfleet with disinterest in contrast to the other Z-Stacks' loathing towards them, but that wasn't to say he was willing to put them in harm's way, or anyone for that matter. At the end of the day, all he cared about was just getting the job done. But ever since the bridge had collapsed, he had taken any and every opportunity he could to avoid putting anyone else in such grave peril. These thoughts rested heavily on his bow as he went about his work.
Ah, Zebedee, how nice of you to finally join us,
said Captain Zero. Zebedee was slowly pulling into the temporary Zero dock. It was a small building, much like the one I was then using for my Star Tugs. However, it was less well kept, to the point where I'm sure it must have made their headquarters in Big City look like the shore-based equivalent to the Vienna. If Top Hat had been forced into living in such a place, he would have been in a fit of rage and be absolutely unbearable until the better weather came.
Sorry, Captain Zero, sir,
Zebedee explained,
but I had a few distress calls to see to.
I've heard all about these distress calls,
Captain Zero replied.
You kept on answering them when you were supposed to be making deliveries. All your deliveries were late, and the coal company has had to cancel several orders. You are a Z-Stack. You don't answer distress calls unless you can turn the situation to our favour. If you get a distress call, pass it on to someone else, or I might as well send you to Lucky's Yard to have you repainted yellow with stars and stripes on your stack.
Zebedee looked downwards in shame. Captain Zero could see this.
However,
he carried on,
it would seem that you lucked out. All of your unwanted clients have paid salvage to me anyway, including Captain Star. You at least managed to earn me some profit with all your helping of other boats. Though I don't want to hear of you doing it again without making sure you bring something home first. If I'm to suffer any more complaints about delayed deliveries from a client, the least you could do is to compensate me for my trouble. Now go to sleep. You've got a lot of work to do tomorrow.
After that, the megaphone fell silent, as did the remainder of the dock. The only sound made from Zoran, consisting of a
Come on, get to your berth already,
followed by a disgusted creep, once Zebedee had done so. The next morning, Zebedee awoke to the sounds of his captain's megaphone.
Right, now listen to me, you horrible lot,
he called.
There's only one day of work left before the Christmas party. It just so happens to come on the same day that some heavy snow is due in. So if any of you even wants to stand a chance of attending, you better get your jobs done and on time, or else missing a Christmas party will be the least of your worries by the time I finish with you. Now listen, Zip, Zach, you're needed to deliver some timber barges to the quay. They're to be transferred to the railway for delivery to the factories inland. Their supplies will be depleted once the festive season is over, and we've got the contract for their goods until the ice clears, so make it count, and no stupid ideas of running barges into anything this time. Aye, sir. Aye, sir.
The Zero Switchers replied.
Zach,
Captain Zero continued.
some hopeless sucker of a Schumer has gone and got themselves stuck on them rocks. You will need to fetch a crane and haul them off, and be sure to claim salvage when you do.
Got it, sir,
said Zack.
Zoran, Zebedee, you two are going into port again. The icebreakers are still at work, so remain at the mouth of the port until they are finished. Then I'll need you to start looking for any boats or ships with valuable goods in them, and bring them into port. Some of those ships are carrying food, so force them into paying a high price when you dock them.
Right away, Captain Zero, sir,
said Zoran. He sneered at Zebedee.
and don't you go getting any ideas about helping others neither. All right, creep?
The Zero Fleet then set off to their respective tasks. On their way, Zoran and Zebedee had to pass a temporary base. Zoran carried on, but Zebedee began to gently slow down a couple of knots. He listened out for the orders I was giving to my Star Tugs. Good morning, Starfleet, I began. Good, explained Top Hat. How can it be good when my monocle looked like an iceberg?
Could only be an improvement on you then,
grinned Big Mac, to the agreeing laughter of the rest of the fleet. Oh, do be quiet, Big Mac, Top Hat retorted.
Then quit your complaining,
10 Cents retorted. Yes, that will do, I said. Now settle down, everyone. Listen, tonight is the night of the Christmas party at Uptown. I will need you all to work as hard as possible before you go there. Believe me, nothing beats a good Christmas party. But if we don't stay on top of our work during this season, then we'll have a backlog when the weather improves. It's already going to be bad enough when that heavy snow arrives later today. Then why have a Christmas party when there's going to be such foul weather? Asked Top Hat. Because, Top Hat, it's a tradition at Uptown. These people have been kind enough to let us relocate here for the time being. The least we can do is accommodate and take part in their traditions. Now pay attention, everyone. Hercules, you go and help escort the cargo ship St. Jeanette out to sea. When you've finished, I need you to bring in the Trawler, the Wellerman, into the port. He's loaded with fresh fish ready for the city folk to eat over Christmas, and will need to be docked by tonight at the very latest. On my way, sir, said Hercules. Toodaloo, my dears, he added as he moved off. Top Hat, the naval frigate Vesuvius has just been loaded with ammunition. It needs to be towed to their base upriver, and Blue Nose is out of service with a jammed rudder this morning. Oh, very well, moaned Top Hat. Only because it's nearly Christmas, mind.
And it means getting one up on that naval twit,
10 cents added.
Eh? No interfering from him either, eh?
Sunshine agreed. Top Hat smiled knowingly at them and carried on.
OJ, Lily Lightship has reported a damaged light to her lighthouse. Tow her into port and escort the Corporation Light Barge to her position in her place. Meanwhile, Lucky's Yard will try to make her repairs as quickly as possible.
Aye, aye, sir.
OJ said.
Grampus, the Coast Guard needs you to patrol the coast and see if any sea craft are stuck in the ice. If they are, inform the rescue teams immediately. Right away, Captain Star,
said Grampus, submerging under the water.
10 cents, sunshine,
I continued.
Crates of toys and equipment for you again. Fetch them from the factories. Puffer will be waiting for them at the quay. Yeah, right, Captain Star,
called 10 cents.
Yes, sir,
said Sunshine.
Warrior, Big Mac, you're needed to help escort ships into port again today and remain on your guard. The Z-Stacks are on the same job.
Aye, aye, sir,
said Big Mac.
We'll show those guys how a real tug handles work.
Right, Big Mac, agreed Warrior. We'll be there and back with all our ships before they've even had a chance to get one. Well, just make sure nothing happens to you today, Warrior, I said.
Aye, we all know what happens when you start rushing the boat.
Big Mac agreed. As soon as the Star Tugs were setting off, Zebedee cautiously made his way over to OJ.
Here, Star,
he said.
A word. Zebedee?
Asked OJ.
Whatever's the matter? Nothing. I ain't asking for advice or anything, but...
Zebedee trailed off, uncertain what to say next.
Go on,
encouraged OJ patiently.
Well, it's like this, you see. If you spend so much time with someone building up an image and all that, and something happens that shows a different bit of you, how can you talk to them about it? About what?
Asked OJ. Zebedee sighed.
These Star Tugs sure could be dense sometimes,
he thought.
Well, take us Zeros, for example. Everyone thinks we're a bunch of thugs and crooks, but they don't understand. There's more to us than meets the eye, you know. Oh, I see,
said OJ thoughtfully. He took a long, hard look at Zebedee.
Well, if I were in a position like that,
he said,
I wouldn't be afraid of showing my true self. If you're part of a group of thugs and crooks, as you say, then all I advise is to be true to yourself. You don't have to be like all the others. In fact, the only one who can decide how you act is, well, you. And if some certain incidents have helped make you a better tug, then that's a very wise course of action to follow. But what if you live in fear of how others may react?
Zebedee spluttered.
Then let them act how they act,
said OJ simply.
The important thing is to never lose track of who you really are, and to carry on being your own tug, no matter what they say. If they don't like it, so be it. But that doesn't mean that you have to be like them. And I don't know about you, but I believe we've all got work to do.
And off he paddled in the direction of the port. Zebedee let out another sigh. and followed on. This time, however, he was feeling that bit more confident in himself. When he arrived at the mouth of the port, he found Zoran arguing with Big Mac and Warrior. Looking around him, Zebedee could see that some parts of the shoreline were still cut off by ice. It was likely, therefore, that the icebreakers hadn't finished their work just yet. Zebedee came up behind the two Star Tugs and guessed from the expression on Zoran's face what they were arguing about.
Pah! You two stars don't know the first thing about docking ships. No wonder you hadn't gotten anything yet,
he sneered.
Hey, you cannot talk, Zoran,
retorted Big Mac.
You've not shifted a single thing since we've arrived. Only 'cause I'm waiting for my alleged partner to turn up,
Zoran protested. Then he looked angrily at Zebedee.
Oh, look! How nice of you to join us, Zebedee. Had a nice little chat with the Star Piddler, did you? You make me sick. Stow it, Zoran, said Zebedee. Even they know we can't go into port until the icebreakers are finished.
Yeah, even I know that, added Warrior.
What, you, Warrior? I'm surprised you know anything at all with your stack in the clouds all day long. What's that supposed to mean, Zoran?
Big Mac demanded. Zebedee ignored them. He had seen some lights in the distance, and they were heading right towards them. He readied his engine for what he feared would come next, and he was right to do so. Nantucket had been out at sea for several days, fetching crates of meat, pottery, paint, and china clay from a dockyard overseas. These were to be delivered to several shops and factories around the port, in order to keep the city's industry thriving. But it had been a long and rough journey, and he was feeling tired. Before the tugboats came into view, he had long since made the decision to try and enter into port by himself.
It's better than waiting around all day,
he said to himself.
And besides, at least it means I won't have to pay good money to anyone.
His speed increased as he put on full power. Then he saw the tugs dead ahead of him and tried to stop, but it was no use. He cried,
Stop! Stop!
He desperately tried forcing his engines into reverse, but it was no use. He was still going much too fast. In a desperate bid to send a warning, he sounded his horn loudly, but none of the tugs had noticed him except for Zebedee, who had already noticed that Warrior was right in Nantucket's path. If Nantucket struck Warrior, he could breach the harbour tug's hull and capsize him. Revving his engine as much as he could, Zebedee immediately raced forwards and shoved Warrior hard. Warrior was sent flying as Nantucket hurtled past, just missing Zebedee by mere inches, before ramming into the ice and finally coming to a sudden halt. What happened? Warrior said, stunned.
I'll tell you what's happened. Zebedee's gone and saved your stack again. That old duck bucket's gone and struck the ice instead. Well done, Zebedee,
said Big Mac, feeling both relieved and surprised at the same time.
What that?
Zoran trailed off. He frowned. Then he glowered at Zebedee. A dark look crossed his face, darker than anyone had ever seen before.
I'll go and get the Coast Guard,
Zebedee said, starting to back away.
No need,
came a voice. The tugs looked and saw a familiar white shape coming towards them, accompanied by a trail of bubbles.
Well, Nantucket. You're making quite the name for yourself,
said the Coast Guard, coming alongside.
Hazarding yourself, endangering a fellow vessel, attempting to gain illegal entry, queue jumping when other ships are carrying more vital loads. Grampus?
He asked as the midget submarine resurfaced.
How bad is the damage?
Well, the hull is dented, but no breach, Grampus replied. But I don't think that'll last for very long if he tries to leave us anytime soon.
Right, said the Coast Guard. Big Mac, Warrior, escort Nantucket to Lucky's yard, please. I will accompany you myself for questioning. Zebedee, report to me on Boxing Day, please. As soon as you've done your other work. I'll need a statement from you. And thank you for preventing a disaster. I'll be putting in a good word for you with your captain later. I wish you wouldn't.
thought Zebedee, now eyeing a very angry Zoran.
As for you, Nantucket,
The Coast Guard continued,
you may consider yourself under arrest. I hope you've got no plans for Christmas, because it looks like you'll be spending it in dry dock while your hull is repaired.
As Nantucket was too big for a floating crane, the 4 tugs had to pull him out before Big Mac and Warrior could escort him to Lucky's yard. Luckily, their combined strength was more than enough, and soon he was free of the ice. Right, come on, Dirt Bucket, Warrior said sternly.
Hey, and no more tricks this time,
agreed Big Mac. Nantucket said nothing, but mournfully let himself be towed away. Zebedee watched on before heading back to work. All day long he kept thinking about the incident and how he had responded to it. That evening he was taking on coal at the depot. His mind was still on Nantucket's near miss with Warrior. He wondered how one tramper could be so careless as to take such foolish risks as that. If he hadn't acted then... He was rudely startled out of his thoughts when a barge blocked his bow. He tried reversing, only to find someone else behind him.
You're so lucky I'm not taking explosives,
Zoran seethed in a quiet but dangerous voice.
Otherwise I'd bloody murder you. Hey,
said Zebedee.
You heard,
said Zoran bitterly.
I don't believe you. I can't even call you a dummy, you're just so stupid. What are you talking about?
Asked Zebedee.
All I did was save one tug for Mom. Yeah, and you've been saving lots of tugs for Mom, haven't you?
Zoran snarled.
At least if it were one of us, like me or one of them other morons, I and Captain Zero wouldn't mind so much. But no, it has to be a starter, doesn't it? So what?
Replied Zebedee.
It's no big deal. No big deal?
Shouted Zoran.
What's that zero up there on your stack for then? Decoration? Shut up, Zoran!
Snapped Zebedee. There was a long silence.
What did you say to me?
Zoran said in a low voice.
I said shut up!
Zebedee no longer cared about Zoran now. He had had enough. He had remembered OJ's advice and was now determined to follow through with it.
You idiots are the same. Heck, what am I saying? We Z-Stacks all the same. We keep on either messing up contracts or coming up with dishonest schemes just to get some work. No wonder why the only real money we get comes from crooks. No one else will touch us, and all because of us. You shoved Sunshine into a liner. Zip and Zug blocked the star switches with a fire barge. Even Zag couldn't do a job without his engine going on the way. At least when I made my mistake, I actually thought about what I had done. But you? No. You never learned from any of those things. You tried taking Dirt Bucket before you was cleared of quarantine. You got yourself so frightened by the White Fleet that you missed out on some money from Izzy Gungmiss, and you scuttled yourself by travelling them and Zug upriver. Zug's an imbecile, yeah, but he's one of our own. You put him and the stars in danger, and you had to spend some days in dry dock for repairs while the rest of us did your work. You wonder why people don't like us much? We Zeds are nothing but a bunch of crooks to everyone. Crooks who think of nothing but their own stupid selves. You want to know why I help the Star Tugs? It's because someone has to show everyone that we're not all idiotic, greedy villains too obsessed with money to be bothered with others.
Another long pause. Zebedee wondered how Zoran would react.
Idiotic, greedy villains.
Zoran's voice was now back to its normal pitch, but with an unnerving sense of anger in his words.
Too obsessed with money, eh? You cretinous, ungrateful, spiteful little brat of a tugboat. Do you have any idea what it was like when I joined before all of you lot? Times were hard. Our company was going bust. We had to take every job that came to us. You think I'm devious just because I want to be? I'm like this because if I wasn't back then, our company would go out of business and we'd all be scrapped. I don't even think I'm making it all up either. You didn't see Burke and Blair asking about your price a few weeks after you arrived. Nor did you see our captain become tempted to sell you off to him. I did. And that almost happened to me. You carry on trying to get your jobs done, only to drop them in a moment when the stars are stuck. But I've been trying to keep this fleet from folding ever since day one. You call me greedy and obsessed with money? Well, have you ever considered the fact that I was just trying to save all your sorry rudders, eh? No. I try my hardest to keep you all away from the Bracer's yard, and this is the thanks that I get. You swank about, pretending you're better than the rest of us put together, and go make buddies with the Star Mob. Well, no more.
Zoran threw a rope around Zebedee's moorings and fastened it tightly.
Come with me,
he snarled, pulling Zebedee sharply on the tow line. The Wellerman was floating just outside the port entrance. His navigator was still new to the job and had been having a hard time trying to find a map to the port. Zoran pulled Zebedee up a short way behind.
Now,
Said Zoran.
you persuade that tramper to head somewhere else, or I'll see to it that you're kicked out of the fleet. What? But I would never!
Zebedee started. Look, said Zoran.
It's very simple. Either send them somewhere else or get out.
Zebedee sighed. He felt he couldn't win. So he floated over to the Wellerman and began talking to him.
Here, listen. What's a trawler like you doing out here at this time?
He asked.
Delivering fish,
Said the Wellerman through a megaphone.
What's it to you?
Nothing.
Exclaimed Zebedee.
Just curious is all.
Curious, grumbled the Wellerman. Great.
Just great.
I
get slung out of my dock at a daft time in the morning. I battle through wind, rain and snow just to get here, and now some nosy old tug is asking me stupid questions. I've already got enough of my bow, what with me trying to find some place called Big City and all.
Cool it, will ya? I was only asking.
Zebedee replied.
Look, you said you were looking for Big City.
Yeah, the Wellerman replied. Might as well ask. Know where it is?
Yeah, I do.
Zebedee gulped. He could see Zoran out of the corner of his eye, glaring at him.
It's about 20 miles along the coast, northeast of here. Turn around and keep the coast on your port side.
Thanks, I suppose, muttered the Wellerman. He turned around and steamed in the direction Zebedee had instructed to him. Zebedee looked guiltily at Zoran. The Z-Stacks leader now seemed to have a small grin on his face.
Ha! Now that's more like it,
he said.
What do you mean?
Zebedee asked.
Well, the Stars had the contract to dock that trawler, didn't they?
Said Zoran.
So all we had to do would be to direct that trawler away from here. What good would that do?
Asked Zebedee.
Well, it would do you good for a start,
Huffed Zoran.
See which side you're really on. And now that you sent that hulking great wreck to Demder Rocks, I should think that that's pretty much sorted.
Zebedee stared at him.
What?
He said. Zoran groaned.
Look, dummy. The Stars have got the contract to dock that trawler, right? So, if the trawler runs aground, there's no contract for them. Yeah, but what if we get reported for it?
Asked Zebedee.
I gave in the directions, and in case you hadn't noticed, we're Zeds, not Stars. Oh, of course I have, you idiot,
snarled Zoran.
And you're forgetting something else. That snowstorm. If anything happens to that trawler, we can just claim salvage on account of it being lost in the storm. Now come on, let's get back to Zero Dock. We've got a party to get ready for.
And he steamed off, feeling exceptionally smug with himself. Zebedee, however, stayed a while. He thought about what he had just done. It was just another of Zoran's schemes, wasn't it? After all, Zoran was always coming up with ideas to get their fleet further up the money tree while trying to beat the Starfleet. Most of the time, Zebedee had gone along with these plots just to get his share of the work done. So why did this feel wrong? All these thoughts occupied his mind so much that he didn't realise he was heading in a completely different direction to the temporary Zero Dock, and was now heading deeper into the port. A few minutes later, Hercules and OJ arrived at the very same spot. OJ had just escorted the Corporation light barge to Lily's original position, while Hercules had been on his way to escort the Wellerman into port. "What's going on here?" he asked. "This is the right place for the Wellerman."
Ah, well,
said OJ.
Perhaps he's running late. You know how difficult it is to keep to time in this weather.
"Not the Wellerman," said Hercules.
I've worked with him before.
And believe me when I say that he's many things, but certainly not unpunctual.
You mean?
Said OJ.
Precisely,
Said Hercules.
we've been sabotaged. Right,
Said OJ.
you'll take a look upriver and see if anyone's seen him lately. I'll have a look in port and see what I can find. That trawler's load is important. We need to form a search party.
Quite right, old darling, and I'll tell the first tug I see to check them the rocks, called Hercules, as they both puffed out of sight, and in completely the wrong direction to the Wellerman's actual route. Zebedee puffed slowly through the port, lost in his own thoughts. It was as well that he was going slowly, for even with the help of the icebreakers, it was still difficult to navigate safely through the icy waters. Not only that, but also the snowstorm had arrived, and the wind and snowflakes were slowly beginning to pick up. Everywhere he went, work was progressing slowly. Dock workers made their way along the port side, taking care not to fall in, while in the city streets, people moved quickly and cautiously, trying to get the last of their Christmas shopping done. He passed by Lucky's yard, where he found Lily Lightship and Nantucket under repairs. Lily's problems were relatively minor. All she needed was a new light bulb, and she would be back at work by Boxing Day. Nantucket, however, had sustained rather more damage. He had been lifted into dry dock, and workers were climbing all over him to inspect the damage. To say neither of them were too impressed with their company would be putting it mildly.
Why do I have to put up with this?
Nantucket complained.
I should be out on the open sea, on my way home to celebrate Christmas with me mates, not clapped up in dry dock in a freezing snowstorm with some over-glorified dock-light.
I'm not too keen on this either, you know,
Lily retorted.
What do you know?
Demanded Nantucket.
All you do is just stand around all day and night, shining a big light. You don't do any real work like us.
I do real work,
Huffed Lily.
My light shines brightly over any potentially dangerous areas, unless, of course, you'd rather run into some rocks.
Pah! A few rocks don't scare me,
grumbled Nantucket.
Oh, and I suppose you know all about that, wouldn't you, with your dented hull?
Lily retorted. On hearing this, Zebedee snapped back into reality. He had seldom ever heard Lily act this way before, and wanted to know what was happening.
Hey, what's going on here?
He asked as he drew up alongside them.
Oh, hi, Zebedee,
Lily said.
Nothing really. I just don't really think much of the present company, that's all. To be honest,
she said in a lower voice,
I begin to see why the others call him Dirt Bucket. The things he says and thinks are not worth repeating. Yeah, well, at least you two have each other over Christmas,
said Zebedee.
Think about it like this. You both are going to be pretty much alone at Christmas, right?
Right. Both vessels agreed.
And you were both originally going to be working on Christmas Day, right? Right,
said Lily.
Well, I was going to push it and go full speed all the way, but...
added Nantucket, with an air of resignation.
Well then, you've both got company for Christmas,
Zebedee said.
Look, neither of you are getting what you want for Christmas, but you're getting what you need instead. It's more important to have things we need than it is for things we want.
Lily and Nantucket looked at each other, feeling a little bit abashed. Zebedee, on the other hand, didn't notice this. He had suddenly just seen something on the dockside opposite. By the pier sat a fishmonger's shop, and all round the front were crowds and crowds of people. Some were young, some were old, but all were scruffily dressed and all were very thin and hungry. Zebedee looked harder still, his face falling even further. He could see parents nursing babies and holding on to their children as they waited in the long queue. He could see elderly men and women huddling in the cold, wrapping their clothes around themselves and each other, in a desperate bid to keep warm.
When will the shop be open, Mummy?
A little boy asked.
Soon, dear. Just as soon as the fish arrives,
his mother replied, though even she didn't look very hopeful. Zebedee watched them all. A small tear crept into his eye.
I'm sorry,
he said quietly, his voice heavy with guilt.
Who's sorry? Who's sorry?
Came a voice. Zebedee looked around quickly and saw OJ paddling towards him. The paddle seamer halted alongside and looked in the same direction as Zebedee.
Carruthers and Sons,
he said.
the only shop in the port where the poor can seek food on Christmas Eve. Take a look at them, Zebedee, all waiting for the wellerman to come in. He's a grumpy old thing, his old wellerman, but ships like him are vital. Hercules was supposed to bring him in. You haven't seen him, have you?
He looked hard at Zebedee, who just glanced at him and turned quickly away.
I see,
said OJ.
You know there's nothing more devastating on Christmas Eve than to be denied the things you really need. Things that could keep families and friends alive. These people have lost everything. Their jobs, their homes, even their families for some. They've had it hard enough already, especially with all this cold weather. And now that the fish hasn't been delivered, some of them will starve to death. They depend on that fish, you know. Can't afford much else, see? Mr. Carruthers has always made it a point to let them take his fish for only 1 cent at Christmas. Charitable old soul he is. Could never bear to see anyone suffering and not do a thing to help them. That's why he ordered a special lord from the wellerman. I guess I'd be right in thinking that it was Zoran who put you up to this.
The long silence that came after this, followed by a quiet told OJ the affirmative.
I take it you tried to heed my advice, and he berated you for it.
OJ asked.
Yeah,
replied Zebedee. Said OJ thoughtfully.
Well, I hope you realize the severity of your actions, Zebedee.
He added severely.
Because of you and Zoran, innocent people will suffer without food if we don't find that trawler. I know you didn't mean it, but sending that trawler away meant taking away meals from people. And it is a very cruel thing to take someone's food away from them.
Yeah, you're right, said Zebedee reluctantly. There was another long pause as he considered what to do next.
How long till Carruthers shuts up shop?
He asked.
Not long,
replied OJ.
About an hour or so. He'll probably close at around 11 p.m. It's 10 p.m. now. Right,
said Zebedee.
1 hour. That should be enough time.
He turned round and shot off at full steam.
Where are you going?
Asked OJ.
Never you mind,
said Zebedee.
Just understand that you were right, Star. This is all my fault. I've got to put it right.
Meanwhile, Zoran was making his way upriver, covered in bunting and ready for the party, when he met Hercules.
Aha, Zoran, and where do you think you're going in such a hurry?
He demanded.
Nowhere, Hercules. Just to the party at Uptown.
Zoran smiled nervously.
I see,
said Hercules.
Of course, the wellerman is late, you understand. Didn't turn up on time. Did you hear about that? Oh, no, Hercules,
lied Zoran, laughing nervously. Said Hercules.
Well then, I suppose it'll also interest you to know that the wellerman's cargo is all bound for Carruthers and Sons, for sale to the poor folk of Big City. You know the sort of people. Have no money, no job, no home, and sometimes can't even afford to feed themselves, never mind their own children.
Zoran gulped. He did not realize this. He thought back to how he had treated Zebedee. Yes, Zebedee had been ungrateful to him about all his efforts to keep the fleet afloat, he thought. But then he had never realized he was forcing Zebedee into something that could hurt others as well as the Star Tugs. OJ quickly paddled up alongside them.
Ah, thank goodness I found you,
he cried.
Zebedee told me everything. It seems Zoran forced him into diverting the Wellerman away from the port.
Zoran gasped. Hercules stared menacingly at him. Right, Zoran, he said furiously. Where's the Wellerman?
Last I saw him, he was heading for Demda Rocks,
Zoran replied, stammering.
The fool must have gone after him. Oh God, what have I done?
Out at sea, the Wellerman was fighting through the snowstorm. It was now getting very dark. Too dark to navigate any vessel safely to the next port. Snowflakes fell thick and heavy all around him, and the wind blew fiercely. He tried to move his rudder, but couldn't.
Blast this cold weather,
he grumbled.
It's made my rudder freeze up.
Bravely, he soldiered on, looking for any signs of a boat or a ship, anything that might offer some assistance. Drat, he cried.
Can't see anything in this storm.
No, let's power on, I suppose. Sooner I get to port, sooner I get some help.
As long as I stay close to the coastline.
Eventually, he saw a faint light in the distance. He could feel the wind pushing behind him now, and water began to push him slowly forwards. But he didn't care. His propeller span faster and his engine sped up as he sailed with ever-increasing speed towards what he hoped was an end to his long and weary journey. If he had not been so overzealous, I do not doubt that he might have prevented what happened next. As soon as the Wellerman reached the source of the light, he discovered it to be nothing more than the Corporation light barge.
What now?
He exclaimed, but his cry was cut short by its loud klaxon. Dreading what lay ahead of him, he slowed his engine and tried to reverse himself, but it was no good. The current pushed him forwards, right past the light barge. Dimly, he could see the faint outline of a rock in the distance.
Oh, help!
He cried. He let out several distress call flares and sounded his whistle as loud as he could. A deep whistle could be heard in the distance, as the shape of a harbour tug could be made out through the snow. With powerful searchlights glaring brightly, Zebedee hurtled towards the Wellerman as fast as he could.
Stand by,
he called.
I'm coming alongside.
What the? You? The Wellerman called. What are you doing here?
Look, there's no time to explain,
said Zebedee, coming along the trawler's port side.
Just that it's all my fault you came this way, and I'm so sorry for this. But you have to trust me this time. Dead ahead is something you really don't want to run into. Now catch the tow lines as I throw them.
He threw several lines across the Wellerman, who secured them around his moorings as fast as possible. Done, he called.
But my rudder's jammed and my propeller ain't slowing us down much. It's up to you now, nosy.
Right,
called Zebedee. He turned his rudder to starboard and called out again to the Wellerman.
We're turning to starboard. Set your engine to forward again and give it full speed.
Immediately the Wellerman did so, and the water began to churn up hard and fast behind the two vessels as their engines sped up once again. Faintly, the image of the rocks became clearer and clearer as they got closer and closer. But Zebedee didn't think about them for 1 second. He thought about Zoran. He thought about OJ. He thought about the poverty-stricken customers outside the fishmongers. He thought about what he had done. And he was going to put it right, by God, even if it meant going to Davy Jones's locker. He forced his rudder hard to starboard as his propeller whirled around. His engine was now going so fast he felt he might explode. But he didn't stop. Not when the vessel he was towing meant so much to so many. Inch by inch, they were getting closer and closer to the rocks. Yet, degree by degree, they began to turn slowly away from it. Until finally, the rocks nearly scratching his paintwork, Zebedee towed the Wellerman away from Demda Rocks and back towards Bigg City Port. They choked slowly past the Corporation light barge and onwards towards the safety of the port. It must have felt like hours for those two, as they made their way slowly and carefully through the wind and snow, before they finally saw the bright lights of the port shining through the storm. They passed through the harbour mouth, and eventually the snow-covered buildings came into view. Midnight was approaching, and some of the customers were walking home, their hopes for a Christmas meal dashed. But when they saw Zebedee hauling the Wellerman back into port, they turned and quickly ran back to the fishmongers. The two vessels noticed this and smiled. These people would see through both Christmas and the New Year now that they had more food. Lily, Nantucket, OJ and Hercules met them at Lucky's yard, with the Star Tugs and Lightship all smiling warmly at Zebedee. None of them said a single word, as Zebedee came up alongside Hercules and untied himself from the Wellerman, just before moving off to float next to OJ. Understanding the gesture, Hercules turned about and tied onto the Wellerman on the same side where Zebedee had towed him in. Then, with a blast on his whistle, Hercules proceeded towards the fishmongers and docked the trawler. Almost at once, the small cranes on the pier began to lift and unload the crates of fresh fish from the Wellerman's hull. They were then carted away to the fishmongers, and soon, before the hour struck, Mr. Carruthers was hard at work selling the fish to his customers, and all for the price of 1 cent. In fact, the shop was so busy, and he had been so desperate for the load to come in, that he had decided to keep it open for an hour longer. As quickly as they were unloaded, the fish were sold. People ran home with them and cooked them, and soon the whole port seemed to be smelling of cooked fish, with some even combining it with potatoes, eggs and pastry to make a dish called Stargazy Pie. Zebedee quietly floated up to Hercules and the Wellerman. He had something he needed to say.
I'm sorry I sent you off course, Wellerman. Same to you, Hercules. I guess I let that Zoran get the better of me. Should have listened to your advice more, old J. And how?
Chuckled OJ.
Although I suppose with Zoran, you can't always tell if his actions are truly right or wrong. I'm sure that he's just trying his best to keep your fleet together, even if his means of doing so are rather tasteless.
Exactly, my dear, agreed Hercules. But all the same, you shouldn't have let him do that to you. And you have a choice yourself, Zebedee. If you had chosen wisely, none of this would have happened.
I know that now,
said Zebedee sadly.
And Wellerman,
no need to be like that, said the Wellerman. I just feel plain grumpy at times.
Still, you brought the Wellerman in,
added Lily. Exactly, my dears, Hercules agreed. All's well that ends well, thanks to you, Zebedee. It takes a lot of courage to stand up to your teammates, but a lot more courage to put right your own mistakes.
Thanks, sir,
Zebedee smiled.
And don't worry about any tugging fees, Wellerman. I'll pay for 'em.
Done, smiled Hercules. Then we won't say a word to anyone else. Everyone grinned, except for Nantucket, who simply murmured, "Oh, get me a bucket, someone." There was no time for Zebedee, OJ and Hercules to get ready for the party, so they decided to attend it as they were. When they got to Uptown, the dockside was brightly decorated with colourful lights and decorations. A large Christmas tree stood right in the middle of everything, as people stood round admiring it. There were food and drink stands, and even a special stage where the performers local to the area showcased their many talents. Even the Bridge Cafe band took part in the performance, playing an array of both Christmas songs and their most famous hits. The other tugs were moored up by the dockside, all decorated with colourful tinsel and lights. Top Hat was boasting to all who cared to listen about how smart he looked compared to them.
Ugh, if you think he's bad now, just you wait till New Year's Eve,
grumbled Big Mac to the others. Yeah, he'll be worse, agreed Warrior sagely.
Even worse than you, Warrior. Never thought I'd hear such a thing,
teased Zip.
Unless you consider that one's clumsy and the other's a snob,
quipped Zug.
I resent that,
protested Top Hat. Zoran and Zack were the first to notice the 3 remaining tugs joining them.
Here, what's all this? You weren't helping the stars again, were you, Zebedee?
Zack demanded.
No, and technically they helped me.
Admitted Zebedee.
What? Accepting help from a Star Tug?
Said Zack incredulously.
Oh, you wait till I tell Captain Zero.
You do, and there'll be one more shipwreck on Demda Rocks.
Scolded Zoran. Zack opened his mouth again, wanting to say something in retaliation, but the look he got from Zoran told him it would be unwise to do so. As OJ and Hercules moved off towards the other Star Tugs, Zoran beckoned to Zebedee, who came up alongside him.
Hey, Zebedee, I've been thinking,
he said.
You know that thing about helping others? I reckon you were onto something. Yeah, I guess we should have left that old Trawler alone.
He sighed before continuing.
I'm so... heck, you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I get it, Zoran, smiled Zebedee.
And I'm sorry I thought you didn't care about others. We both want to protect others. I guess we just have different means of doing it is all.
Yeah, suppose so. You're alright, Zebedee. At least you got some brains.
Thanks, Zoran.
Zebedee replied, slightly confused at this.
Just don't go making an habit of this.
Zoran added hastily.
Remember, we're out to beat the Star Tugs, not to help them beat us. And don't go telling anyone about this if you want to keep your stack on.
Oh, I know.
Groaned Zebedee.
Today was today, okay?
And with that, the 2 Zero Tugs settled down to enjoy the party. All too soon, it came to an end. One by one, the other tugboats began to leave, until only 2 remained.
You know, I could have sworn I saw something that looked like a fishing trawler pass by the quay earlier,
said Sunshine.
Yeah.
Added 10 Cents thoughtfully.
Yeah, funny that. I overheard Hercules talking to Zoran about something going missing. Hey, and there's Zoran looking sad for some reason earlier. Reckon he had something to do with that, eh? Nah, I don't know. But Zebedee had no decorations, and nor did Hercules, or OJ for that matter. Yeah, maybe.
10 Cents grinned knowingly at Sunshine.
Hey, what? What is it, man?
Sunshine asked.
Nothing,
said 10 Cents.
Just I always wondered what it'd be like if Zebedee were a Star Tug instead of a Z-Stack. Hey, 10 Cents, you think he'll ever leave them for us?
Sunshine asked.
Yeah, I don't know, Sunshine,
replied 10 Cents.
Yeah, but he does seem to act like one of us. Anyway, he's got hidden depths, he has. Come on, let's get home.
10 Cents looked at the town clock. It was past midnight. Christmas Eve had gone. He smiled.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, Sunshine,
he said.
Hey, Merry Christmas, 10 Cents,
replied Sunshine. That day being Christmas Day, there was no work for either of our fleets, so they all spent it relaxing and reminiscing about the events of the year that had gone by, and what they had hoped they would do in the next year. And the year after that, and the year after that. I do not need to tell you what happened in some of those years. They were all distressing enough, and I'm sure you might all have heard about them. But I can tell you this much. Captain Zero never did find out what had happened that night. When he had asked about it, he was told that Zebedee had simply gotten himself lost on his way back after doing his work, and had decided to join the party first in order to keep with boats he knew. It did not spare Zebedee from a harsh tongue lashing from his captain on Christmas Day, but as he was the one who had come up with that response, I do not doubt that he had anticipated this. I also think that both Zebedee and Zoran had learned a valuable lesson that day about part of the true meaning of Christmas, a time of kindness, love, trust and honesty. Everyone has their own priorities in life, and sometimes even the shadiest of characters may act the way they do, thanks to some unseen factors. But the most important thing is to respect that not everyone does things the same way for the same reasons, and that you should never try to force people into doing things they don't want to do. Similarly, everyone has the power to make decisions that can change everything. Zoran had forced Zebedee into tricking the Wellerman against his will. However, Zebedee had seen the error of his race and rescued the Wellerman. Just as he had almost ruined it for them, Zebedee had, in undoing his own actions, saved Christmas by bringing food and hope to those who needed it most. And so, it leaves me to say one thing more, and I think 10 Cents and Sunshine had the right idea. Merry Christmas, everyone.